Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd Podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. So Chris Peterson's gone. Nick Saban's gone. Jim Harbaugh's gone. Dabo Swinney is struggling with the transfer portal and NIL. Ryan Day is struggling defining what Ohio State is. Take Kirby Smart out. He's considered the best coach in college football. I think Kalen DeBoer's really close. And the rest of the country will see that, what Husky fans know. It's really interesting. And this is why you can't give up on people. I could make an argument. The third best coach in college football is Lane Kiffin. And this sport bailed on him. Ole Miss has no business being as good as they are. I mean, let's be honest. The state produces, how many players?
Can't be many.
And Georgia gets the best in Georgia. Bama gets the best in Bama. Florida, it's rated by everybody. That state's only got 3.5 million people. It's Oregon. It's got more players than Oregon. But generally speaking, most of these teams in the top 10 come from highly populated states, fertile recruiting grounds. Is that the Raiders bailed on him. College football bailed on him. And you start looking around and I'm like, and by the way, Sark's somewhere in the top 10. He may not have the trophy yet, but recruiting, culture building, quarterback development, Sark knows what he's doing. He's won a lot of games. Washington was 0-12 when he took it over. They were 7 wins second year, and he handed Chris Peterson some dudes, some NFL bodies. But I was thinking about that today. Take Kirby out and Kalen DeBoer, we know it. Urban's gone, Harbaugh's gone, Saban's gone, Chris Peterson's gone, all these guys. Dabo is struggling with NIL and the transfer portal. He's struggling with it.
He won't do it. He won't do it.
He won't do it. And Ryan Day hired Chip Kelly, which I think is brilliant because the hole in his game, which he acknowledges, is the run game. Ryan admits that. So you can't put him as a top 5 coach now because he's beating Purdue. Lane Kiffin can coach his ass off. That's my take.
One of the best stats I remember hearing last year was Ole Miss has never had back-to-back double-digit win seasons in the history of the program. Lane did it. 22 and 23. And last year when he beat LSU, you're watching him going, the talent gap on these two rosters can't be as close as what it looks like on the field. Obviously, he scares people, but to me, he's got one of the blue bloods, whether it's Florida, if they make a change, whoever. There were rumors that I had heard Oregon, when Dan Lanning got it, he was really interested. People just wouldn't touch him. You get to a point, though, I think, especially in college sports in the NFL, you win enough, who cares? Like, what are we even talking about? And a lot of people think they're going to be a top 10 team. He crushed the transfer portal. He's got a good quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
I do think there's a lot of pressure, though. It's one of those where even if he wins 8 or 9 games and misses the playoffs, it's still a remarkable accomplishment. You win 10, 11, and then 9. You're at Ole Miss, not Ohio State.
Right.
Like, I'm with you on Kalen DeBoer. He's a star. And don't be shocked when they're back in the Final Four with Alabama right away.
I think they will be.
Right? But you should win at Alabama. Even if some guys leave, you're still inheriting every single guy on that roster as someone that Nick had recruited, right? You should win at Ohio State. You obviously should win at USC. Even Sark. It is, to me, much more impressive. They have an unlimited checkbook to sign whoever they want, whenever they want. Now, Sark had a good year last year, though kind of a little soft in the playoff game against Washington. It's way easier to win at Texas than it is at Ole Miss. Like, Lane went to, FAI or FUI or whatever that school was in Florida that no one could even get right if I polled random people that follow sports. And then to Ole Miss, who usually runs through coaches every 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And now he's kicking everyone's ass. He's beating LSU. I just think that it's easy to hire. I think part of what's worked against Lane, it's easy for USC to give $100 million to Lincoln. Like, everyone's on board. It's easy when LSU gives 90 plus to Brian Kelly. Like, we see, I think it is controversial in some of these ADs and whatever to hire Lane. At this point in time, you're crazy if you do not. They're hiring these Billy Napiers and all these other guys. Lane's running circles around them all. So, what he's doing at Ole Miss. Now, here's the thing. He's getting paid $9-10 million there, and they clearly got a pretty good. Does he need to leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's lifestyle. He likes the South. He's told me that. He likes the South. He loves fishing. He's an intense guy. He likes it's you get some space. People are nice. Lane's a little cocky, unique personality, but I also think he's got a great heart. And I think he's really a good coach. I think sometimes when dad's a coach or dad's a broadcaster or dad's a bank president, the son gets placed into a position he's not quite ready for. And if it wasn't for Monty Kiffin, Lane probably doesn't get the Raider job. We don't know. He's just another young assistant. McVay, his, like grandpa or somebody was a general manager. That's different. It wasn't high profile. But I think one of the vagaries of having a famous, successful dad, and if you go into the same industry, is you tend to get inserted into places that eventually you are ahead of people and you will be successful. But Lane was like kid coach, like 32 years old. And I can remember when he went to USC, he just wasn't, and I was rooting for him, but he was a little loose with his private personal life. He just didn't quite know how to be a head coach at USC. It wasn't the play calling. But I think there is an advantage when dad or grandpa or somebody ran the bank and you get into finance. There's an advantage. But I look around college football now, and in a big game, I'm going to tell you this. I would not want to face Lane Kiffin. I think he's clever. And by the way, playing with house money at Ole Miss, he has the talent of most of the top six, but none of the pressure that an Ohio State does if they met in the playoff.
Hey, football fans, if you're looking to dominate your fantasy league next year, then we've got the channel for you. From the NFL draft through training camp in week 1 to Super Bowl Sunday, Fantasy Pros is the home of football content you cannot afford to miss. Subscribe today, and your team will be in championship form in no time.
I think one thing that is dramatically different about him is at USC, he almost had like this angry, edgy, anti-media, being fun, and he's the complete opposite now. He's just much more looser, especially in front of a camera. He feels much more natural. Maybe he just embraced it. Listen, Jimmy Sexton and Nick Saban changed his life. I mean, he says it as much, right, when he goes to Nick. And I wonder if he saw Nick, like, you can be this hard-driving kind of a-hole coach on the field and kind of handle when the lights are on with the media, because you're in that business. As an NFL coach, your roster is your roster. You're not recruiting anyone out there. In college football, it's a little different. It's why Nick, when the camera's on, kind of turns into a different guy. Yeah. He has all these different kind of like characters he can play. Yeah. Where I think Lane struggled with it. Now you watch him. I saw this clip on the internet the other day about he was on with the SEC Network guys and they were asking about his dad. And he's like, you just got this emotional side of Lane. You have to remember, Lane was a quarterback at Fresno State in the late 90s who, when Pat Hill recruited Billy Volek and David Carr, they said, Lane, you're never going to play here. Immediately just transitioned into being a coach with Jeff Tedford, who was the offensive coordinator. This guy transitioned at like 20 years old to being a coach. And like you said, to me, it is an advantage if you do, like, you're mentally, or I would say mature enough to handle it. Like Kyle Shanahan, this guy went right into it. And to me, Kyle's much more serious in the sense of you're not screwing around as much. Lane has some, interests, I would say, outside the football building. I wonder if he just has corralled it all and got the right people around him. But his personality in front of the quote unquote media, or when he's doing things with a camera on, to me is dramatically different than the guy that we saw at USC, which I thought was part of his undoing. He wasn't that likable. Isn't that a huge part of life? Like, if you're kind of likable, people root for you. Like the Sam Pittman guy at Arkansas. I think he's not very good, but everyone loves the guy.
Yeah. He's like everybody's really friendly stepdad. Be hard to fire. It's like the Freakonomics talked about that. I think it was Freakonomics was the book. They talked about that the doctors that get sued aren't the bad doctors. The doctors that get sued are often the most educated and the most successful doctors. They don't have good bedside manner. It's impossible to sue even the incompetent doctor you love. Yeah. Right? It's hard to fire somebody you really have great affection for. It's easy to sue the asshole surgeon that screwed up during the surgery, right? Like, so I think as you become more likable, and let's be honest about this. My dad used to say this: your employment will be based in rooms that you're not in. People will raise their hand. A boss will say, raise your hand. Colin stays or goes. There's 9. You need 5.
Get rid of Middlekauff. The room goes silent.
Hey, me and Logan have those meetings almost every other week.
I know.
But there's a lot to be said with Lane, is that when you're a little snarky and you go on a 3-game losing streak, or it's just much easier to get rid of guys that are a pain.
Well, I'll give you a guy, because in the NFL, that only goes so far. If you're winning 6-7 games, no matter how much they like you, they run you out of town. Arthur Smith, I remember when they fired or Arthur Smith was fired by Arthur Blank, and Arthur Blank's like, I love the guy, I didn't want to do it, but he just wasn't good enough. I was flipping around channels and watching Big Ten Network. They had on Matt Rule. I'm like, I see why this guy's a good college coach. He's just kind of got a personality.
Yeah.
Can own the room when the camera's on. And you're like, I get it. And I've heard he's not easy to play for. It can be really difficult.
Yeah.
And they're the classic team of, like, they bring in this young hotshot quarterback, and the expectations are high, and it's usually hard to live up to those. All of a sudden you win 7-8 games. People are maybe like, can we sneak into the playoffs? Week 2 is Nebraska hosting Colorado. I mean, I don't know if you saw the clip. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Even Dion was like, hey, CBS, whoever hears from CBS, I'm sorry, we're all good now. I would imagine someone at Colorado, like, we can't be doing all this. Like, we got to be a little careful. Pick your battles, Dion. You're not the player. And that's where I think Dion kind of carries himself. Like, you're the coach, but you got all these other guys. And beside your couple sons and Travis Hunter, some of these guys aren't going to be able to back up all your words. Right. We don't have Alabama. We've got to be careful. That game, because last year, remember, Nebraska's quarterback looked like me. I mean, it was a joke.
It was awful.
It's going to be a little more interesting this time around. That's one of those. There's a lot of, like, USC, LSU, and all these. That's a game that I have this season circled. Like, will not be moving off the couch for that one.
John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, 3 and out. As always, buddy, great stuff.
See you, Colin.